Welcome to the YouTube Creators Hub podcast, where we help you conquer the internet one video at a time. We cover everything from how to start a YouTube channel to how to make a video go viral. And now, here's your host, the one and only Dusty Porter.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 334 of the YouTube Creators Hub podcast, where each and every week I interview a wonderful YouTube creator, and I talk with them about their journey on the platform, the different things that have made them successful on YouTube, how to make money on YouTube, and everything in between. So if you're looking to either start, grow, or monetize your YouTube channel, this is a great place to start. We are brought to you today by the fine folks over at TubeBuddy. The one tool I recommend every YouTube creator try at least once. You can use our link in the show notes of this podcast to get a free month of using every tool and suite of tools that TubeBuddy has to offer to you. Huge thank you and shout out to them. We have been a supporter and partnered with them now for over 7 years. So TubeBuddy, thank you so much for continuing to support the YouTube Creators Hub show. Also, the fine folks over at patreon.com/DustyPorter. You can support us over there for less than a coffee at Starbucks every single month. $5 a month with that support gets you a shout out once a month on the podcast with your name and YouTube channel or link of choice. It also gets you access to our little Discord community. And in the future, we're going to be doing Zoom calls to talk about our journeys and what's going on each month with our channels, including myself and other patrons over there. This week, we have Joshua Griffin with the HVAC Guide for Homeowners. We have Stephen R. We have William Foley with Foley Divorce. We have David Stojic with the DIY HVAC Guy, James Adams from Easy Investing Income, and Chase Shelby from The Drone Buddy over on YouTube. Thank you all for supporting me and this content and the podcast, because without you, this would not be possible. So definitely go check that out if you have not already. Also, you're going to see a little form or a Google Sheet in the show notes. It says, hey, if you think you'd be a good fit for the show, fill this out. It doesn't guarantee you that you're going to be on the podcast, but at least get you on my radar to have you as a guest on the podcast. So with all of that housekeeping out of the way, let's go ahead and jump into this week's conversation. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's conversation on the YouTube Creators Hub podcast. Dusty here, as always, joined today by two people, actually. It's the duo Sabrina and Garret from the I Know Dino YouTube channel. They are a husband and wife team, and they are dinosaur enthusiasts behind the channel, as I just mentioned, I Know Dino. The big dinosaur podcast that covers news, interviews, and discussions about dinosaurs. They love dinosaurs so much that they even had a dinosaur-themed wedding. Connect with them on their podcast and YouTube channel, and all those links will be shared after the fact in the show notes of this podcast. Sabrina, Garret, how are you guys doing today?
Great. Thanks so much for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
I am looking forward to this conversation for a lot of different reasons, but I got to open with this. Dinosaurs, huh? I've done this podcast now for going on 8 years, and I've had everyone from a Santa Claus on YouTube to lawyers and doctors and vloggers and video game creators, but I've never had anyone on here that focused on dinosaurs. So one of you guys, we'll start with Sabrina, and then I'll let you hand it off to Garret. Let me know the origin story of the I Know Dino YouTube channel. How did that come to be?
It's a bit of a journey, because we started as a website first with a dinosaur museum, because we grew up loving dinosaurs, as we found our audience also grew up loving dinosaurs. And then for us, you go through those teenage years and you kind of find some other interest for a while. But then we met as adults and rediscovered our love of dinosaurs together. It was when we were living near the American Museum of Natural History in New York, and we were just able to go to those dinosaur halls all the time. And it was just so cool seeing all of those fossils and being reminded of how awesome they are. So then we thought, well, there's a lot of other dinosaur museums out there, dinosaur exhibits. So we started this website, which was, there were blog posts, yes, but also a map of museums we started documenting around the world. A lot of it was aspirational. Like, we want to get to as many museums as we can, because now we're up to over 300 museums?
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's a lot, in large part thanks to our community, because there's no way we would know about all of these.
Yeah, a lot of them don't have great, websites and things, so they can be a little tricky to find at times.
And so, just to be clear, and then I want you to continue, you're listing these museums and documenting information about them on the website. Is that what you're saying?
It's
It's
on a
mostly a map.
yeah.
So you can put in your address. It'll like show you what the closest one is, or you can just zoom out and see sort of like a store locator, except for
Okay.
dinosaur museums.
Okay, interesting. All right, continue. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So then we had we got married and we had our dinosaur themed wedding, and we realized we didn't want to stop talking about dinosaurs, and we live in this golden age of dinosaur discoveries because there's a new one discovered pretty much every week, which we wanted to know more about. And we decided, well, Garret at the time, this was 8 years ago now, we're celebrating our 8-year anniversary of the podcast this month, and he had been listening to a lot of podcasts and knew, so we knew like, okay, this is the format we want, these are the kind of segments we want, and we just dove right in.
Yeah, because there weren't any other podcasts coming out every week that covered all these new dinosaur discoveries, because there was a new discovery almost every week, so there was a lot to keep up with.
Yes. Yeah, and we kind of went from there, and then about a year after we launched the podcast, the audio only version, that's when we launched the YouTube channel.
And I think one of the most interesting things about you guys is just how long you've been doing the podcast. I mean, you just mentioned it, 8 years. You're already up to episode 417. As a podcaster myself, I know how difficult that is to do. And so, with that being the case, pats on back for you guys there. That's just amazing that you guys have gone that long. And to be completely honest with you, that's interesting on my end to know that there's that many types of dinosaurs. And basically what you like to do is you cover a singular species on the podcast, and you post that video. You also have an audio podcast. So with all of that said, you had the audio podcast, then you transitioned over to YouTube. What was the initial phase like on YouTube? What were some things that you learned early on, kind of transitioning from audio only to video?
Thumbnails are very important,
Yeah.
as are titles. Although I feel like we learned how important titles were later.
Yeah. For a very long time. And still to this day, our titles are not great because they're mostly like episode number blank. And then we used to just make the episode title our dinosaur of the day. But as those dinosaurs got more and more obscure, we realized no one's going to click on this with some obscure dinosaur name. So we started making it like the most exciting thing we talked about in the episode, which helped a little bit.
Yes.
Okay, interesting. So thumbnails are a big deal. Was one of the main things that you guys learned early on. Was there anything else in that early phase where you were thinking, well, we've been doing these audio podcasts for a while now, but you kind of realized, pretty quickly, like, oh man, I gotta do this, or this has to be focused on?
Let me think. Yes. Well, I can't remember if this was early on or something we realized later, but we've gotten some feedback on this too. It's something we're working on. Is right now our audio podcast, most of our videos are a static image and then the audio, and we know we need to do more there.
Yeah.
So we have been working on that and branching out with shorts and live streams and videos that are meant to be video first.
Yes, because a lot of people have suggested, why don't you add some images to your videos, which are really just podcasts with a static image. And we realized, we sort of tried it a little bit, and we realized, well, an hour-long video on YouTube, which is mostly people talking, isn't really the best content for YouTube. You kind of have to make a specific thing, like podcasts themselves. We do have listeners that are happy to listen to us on YouTube as a podcast, and it's just the player they're most familiar with. It's easier for them to subscribe and do the little bell thing so they get their notifications and they don't miss it because they're in YouTube anyway, rather than having a separate app if they don't listen to many podcasts.
Right.
But that's most of our listeners at this point. We don't have a lot of video first traditional YouTube viewers because we don't make that many videos. So yeah, we're trying to get more of those, and we know that yes, for YouTube, they need to be a lot shorter than a podcast. They need to have a lot more going on than just a static image with people talking.
So it's something we are pivoting towards.
Yeah. So we've made a few of those, and those have by far been our most popular videos. So that's definitely the way to go.
Oh, yeah. We did it was kind of an experimental one. When Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom came out, we were actually in Taiwan at the time, and the movie got released in Taiwan a few days earlier than the U.S., and we thought, oh, this is a great opportunity to let people know what exactly which dinosaurs they can expect to see in the movie. So we made our own video where we had a whiteboard and just like drew pictures of each dinosaur and went through the list real quick. And that is probably one of our most popular videos still.
Yeah. It's very simple, but it had the information. It was quick, so it sort of fit with the YouTube trying to just digest some information really quickly and visually.
Yeah, it's taking the kind of relevancy, of the movie and kind of that's what I always recommend folks do. So it's interesting to hear you say that. I'm going to ask this next question just because I want to know the information for myself, and I do that often here on the podcast. For someone who has a podcast, you guys haven't delved into the video podcast side of things just yet. It's something that I'd like to transition to before the end of the year myself this year. What are some pointers you can give folks who have a podcast wanting to move over to YouTube?
Take it slow. Like, it doesn't have to be perfect from the beginning. For us, it was because we started a year later after we had all these episodes built up. We kind of had the videos trickling out. We didn't make them all at once because it was just the two of us working on it. So, take your time if you need to, and it's okay to iterate too. I think the things that you do in the beginning, see if it works, if it's something sustainable, like you're okay doing this every week or whatever your cadence is for your podcast and you're comfortable with that.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because when we started, we both had other full-time jobs. So the most we could really manage was the podcast, sticking a static image on it and posting that on YouTube. And occasionally we'd hear a new listener either show up on our podcast through like the podcast traditional RSS feed that moved over from YouTube, or comment on the YouTube video like, oh, this is so great, I'd never heard of this. And we're like, oh, good. We're glad we posted this here because it's a new person that we wouldn't have found otherwise. Even though the same content is available elsewhere, they're just people that prefer different channels. So we were happy with that, but now we're both working on it full time, and we're thinking, okay, yeah, let's try to get more involved with this. YouTube is clearly a great place to be. So what can we do? And I don't know for us if we're going to switch to video podcasting, because we edit it quite a bit, and I know it is popular to do those like jump cuts where it's not too bad if it's not a single take kind of thing, but I don't know if we want the videos on us all the time. It's a lot of pressure to like look presentable and all that.
It's one of the reasons why I haven't done it yet, to kind of open the curtain a bit for the listeners here listening to my show. It's something that I've wanted to do for a long, long time, but the fear of, like you said, it takes the workload from maybe 60 or 70 up to 80 or 90 or 100, right? Because you then have to prepare how you look. You have to prepare other devices like a camera. You also have to make sure your guest has a camera, right? So there's a bunch of other things that are involved with it. And so I'm with you guys. It makes me nervous to think about. And just the thought of it for me is just like, oh man, do I really want to go that route?
We also have our faces like buried in a dynamic mic right up to it, and we're usually reading notes. And so I don't know. For a while we were thinking about there was this thing released like 4 or 5 years ago called Adobe Character Creator or something.
Yeah, that's correct.
Like
yes.
It was similar to the iPhone thing with where you show your face and then it makes you into like a little anime character, and its mouth opens when your mouth opens.
Yes.
And we thought like, oh, maybe we could use those and make like characters of ourselves, and they would be talking. And then we'd still have a camera on ourselves. It would still be sort of like us talking, but it wouldn't matter if we did our hair and if we were reading notes and things like that, because the character would look good.
Editing would be easier, yeah.
Yeah. But I don't know. I don't think that would actually be that popular. People would be like, what's with these weird cartoon people talking?
Well, one thing that seems to be working for podcasters is the short form videos, where maybe you have the audio only podcast, but you have a 1 minute or 3 minute or whatever long video. And that could be your face just kind of recapping something particularly interesting in an episode.
Yeah. We do a lot of that now, not just on YouTube, but we record the podcast. And when you do a podcast that's an hour long, there are certain pieces of it where you're like, ooh, that was really good. And then you can pull that out later and repurpose it either as a TikTok video or a YouTube short, or even just a longer YouTube video if it's a little more content. that's sort of more the direction I think we're going to go, because we don't want to record ourselves all the time.
Well, yeah. And I'll say for our YouTube shorts, it's a lot of it because we like showing off the dinosaur images. So it's not necessarily us on camera, but as many dinosaur illustrations as we can manage.
That was what I was going to ask you guys. You talked about transitioning and utilizing shorts. What have you found to be the difference in the workflow and maybe the results from more long-form video as opposed to the short form?
They're really different. I think the nice thing about the long-form videos, I think you make more money on ads, so it's nice that way. And they're a little bit more predictable too. Like if I put out a certain type of video that's like an unboxing of some dinosaur thing, I know about how many views we'll get in a ballpark. On shorts, it's like sometimes we'll get 10 views and sometimes we'll get like 30,000. It's like, what is the algorithm seems much more crazy for the shorts than it does for the regular videos.
Or we haven't quite figured out what exactly works the best yet.
Yeah. I think it's more time sensitive. Like with the long form videos, I think people find them searching for them. So there's a much longer tail. Whereas on shorts, I think it's more, it gets promoted by the algorithm for a day or two, and then it basically just disappears into the ether.
Well, maybe. I think with shorts, it's more important to have as much watch time as possible. You've got a 1 minute video. You want people watching most of that video. And so the way you approach it would be a little bit different. You have to have that video first mindset. Like, what's the hook that's going to get people interested, and how do I keep them entertained for the next 60 seconds?
Yeah, and big text on it. Watch till the end. You won't believe how this ends.
Yeah, I think I want to dabble with shorts, but I do tutorial videos on my channel, and like what you just said, I'm not sure how they perform in search. And so, like you said, if it's a case where they promote them for a brief time, but like what I would like is for shorts to be very much searchable and showing up in the algorithm like my long form tutorials do, for years to come, and answering people's questions, even if they ask it, a week after I post my tutorial or, 2 years. And so with that being the case, it makes me nervous. And so it's one of those things to where I would like to see, I would like to know some more information and data in regards to that. So, but anyways, I appreciate you guys answering that question. That was very much something that I was curious about. Now, I would like to have you guys, if you would, answer the next question in regards to when it comes to YouTube. What is something that you wish you would have known sooner?
I think knowing how important it is to collaborate with other YouTubers. And it's interesting because it's similar if you're focused just on audio podcasts. We've found the exact same thing. And in our case, we got a big bump for our YouTube channel a few years ago when Austin McConnell, who has a much larger YouTube channel than us, mentioned us in a video. It was really great, actually. Kind of woke up one morning and all of a sudden we had a flood of new subscribers and people commenting on how much they like dinosaurs and they're glad they found our show. Like, this is amazing.
There were lots of comments like, Austin sent me here, and we're like, who is Austin? We don't know an Austin. And then eventually we found this video, and it was just this YouTuber who was being a little philanthropic and said, like, here are 5 channels that I've found that I don't know the people, but I just like them. And you should go follow them.
And so we started watching his channel too. He's got some great content. And then since then, we've reached out and worked with other YouTubers via crossovers and interviews. And then the nice thing with that is we can take the audio from some of it and also put it back into the podcast.
Yes.
Yeah.
I guess that's another thing that we probably should have thought of earlier on, which is how to repurpose things. That you can do the research for something, get it pretty polished, present it, and then you can redo it 5 other ways for different areas. You don't have to just edit it down or ignore those other channels because they're overwhelming. You can kind of reuse the same stuff.
Yeah, repurposing content is something that YouTube creators need to be better at, whether it be their blog or website or email list or podcast or short form elsewhere like TikTok or whatever it may be. And to hear you guys talk about that, I love that. I think that's so cool. Talk about the production process, start to finish. Like what is it? You talked about you guys heavily edit the podcast. What does it look like from start to finish when it comes to doing a video?
For a video, I guess what we do is similar in that if we already have a podcast, it's easier because we know what we're going to talk about. We don't have to do too much scripting and figuring out what we're going to say. But if we don't, obviously that's the place to start. You come up with the idea, you sort of write it down, you figure out what kind of shots you're going to need. So half the time I have to buy a new camera thing because we don't do that many videos. I'm like, I need an overhead shot. Oh, we don't have anything for that. I have to go find a tripod where I can adjust it so it'll shoot straight down kind of thing. Or one time we hung a webcam from a chandelier above our dining room table because that was the only way we could do it. But yeah, so like figuring out the shots and then we do the recording, set up the lights, I guess is the next thing.
Yeah, lighting's important.
And if we're going to be on the camera, then we put on a lav mic so that people can hear us or set up our regular podcasting mics. Otherwise, we don't have to worry about the audio until afterwards. A lot of times we'll do the voiceover type thing after the fact. And then, yeah, we record it.
Then the editing process, which is a lot of putting things together, making sure it seems, the transitions are fairly smooth. I guess for YouTube, they don't always need to be the smoothest, but making sure it doesn't feel like it's too long on one shot.
Yes. And
getting enough B-roll footage, that kind of thing.
Yeah, the B-roll is an important thing to keep in mind. That's for sure. And then we usually either edit in Premiere Pro or in Descript, depending on how complex the video is going to be. And then, we just push it out.
Well, there's the publishing process, which is the whole, okay, we got to write the description, make sure you have the right keywords, you're targeting the right people. What's that title that's going to grab people's attention? How do we make the best thumbnail? Canva has been really great for us for a lot of things, the YouTube thumbnails, but also just social media posts in general.
I've just started. I've known about Canva, have worked with them in the past and done some tutorials for them on their website, but I've just recently started tinkering around with using them on my channel, and man, I agree with you. It has been a lifesaver. The templates that they have are just wonderful. Now, let's talk about monetization and making money. I guess question one is, do you guys do this full time as far as content creation? And is this something that you guys do full time together or one of you, or how does that work?
Yes. As of early 2021, it became full time for both of us.
Okay.
So that took a while.
And where are you guys making the most money? I'm not asking for exact numbers, but where are you making the most money from?
Definitely not YouTube. It would be it depends on the month. It's always our podcast as the revenue generator, meaning mostly Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, all those things kind of feed into the same thing because on the show, no matter where you're listening, we tell people to join our Patreon. And so we get a good amount of money from Patreon, and we also get a decent amount from ads. It depends on the month whether there's more from ad revenue or more from Patreon, but those are always the two biggest sources for sure.
But the YouTube monetization has been growing.
Yes. We've been monetized on YouTube for like 6 years or something.
Yeah.
It used to be easier to get monetized on YouTube. So we were in this group that was monetized and we were making, I don't know, a few cents, maybe 15 cents a day. And then they put a cap where you had to have at least X number of...
There's 1,000 subscribers and 4,000 hours of watch time in a year, something like that.
Yeah. So then we had a year where we weren't making any money because we hadn't reached that yet. And then we got back to that, and then we could monetize our videos again. But that was years ago at this point. So
another question I would have for you guys, you mentioned making money from the podcast. How are you doing that? How are you monetizing the podcast?
Yeah, the ads are the biggest thing. So we do a lot of host-read ads where it's brands that we like. Either we've reached out to them or they've reached out to us. It's often very targeted to our dinosaur niche, but not always, because our audience, I mean, they're adults like us. We got a wide variety of interests, so it all works. And yeah, and then Patreon. Those are the two biggest, but we also, like we said, YouTube. There's merchandise sales. We have some books, so there's some book sales. It's a lot of different things
Yeah.
come together.
My favorite is Patreon because it
Patreon's
makes
community.
that actual community thing.
Yeah, it's the community driven on Patreon, and it's wonderful that you're using YouTube alongside the podcast and the website and Patreon. I think using them in tandem, like what you guys are doing, is the way to do it. And can you just mention, if you don't mind, how many downloads do you normally average on a normal episode of the podcast?
Ooh, per episode, I'm more familiar with our monthly downloads.
Yeah, our monthly downloads is what we pay the most attention to because we do dynamic ad insertion.
Sure.
So that's what the most relevant to us is. And it's about 60,000 downloads a month, I would say, is where we're at.
So 60,000. And if you don't mind sharing, just for those that are listening to the show, if you can't share, that's completely fine. But a podcast that gets around 60,000 downloads a month, that is very targeted as far as you know who's listening to the show, right? People who are interested in dinosaurs and those types of things. What could be an average ad that you sell for that podcast? Like as far as money goes for you guys in return.
It really depends because it's great, yeah, if you're niche and you know your audience really well, but it also depends a lot on the brand, how well that brand is going to fit, how well it also helps like make sure that you like the brand.
Yeah. And for us, we price it differently depending on the length of it because it's a fair amount of upfront work to make an ad. So if it's going to be, I think one time there was an advertiser and we said, hey, it costs about this much for a week or for a month. And they said, oh, we only want to do 1 week. And we're like, that's going to cost a lot more because it's going to be a lot of work for us. Like, are you sure you want to do such a short campaign? But some people are more interested in really testing in a lot of places. They're okay with paying more per ad. And then we also, when we sell ads, we sell them as a pre-roll, a mid-roll. We put them in our podcast text. We also put them on our website, and we put them in the newsletter. So we sell that as a whole package.
Right. And then there can be add-ons to the package, such as a short video on our social media or some other, maybe it's a branded episode, then that's going to cost more.
Yeah. But then we also have dynamic ad insertion, which fills the space where we don't do those custom sales to people. And that just happens automatically in the background from our podcast host. So it can range quite a bit. I would say on the low end, maybe $5-ish CPM or something. I don't know. Right. That would be like the auto-filled pre-roll only sort of thing, maybe $10. I'm not sure exactly what they sell them at because we don't have a lot of granularity into that. And then on the upper end, you could be $50, $60 CPM. And CPM is a cost per 1,000 downloads. So if you had 60,000 downloads and you were paying $60 CPM, that would be $3,600 to do a full month of ads for the show. So that's sort of the high to low.
You also don't need to necessarily sell by CPM because you could put together these packages and it could be, all right, you've got the ads on the podcast, but you've also got the newsletter mention, you've got social media posts. Maybe you want to integrate YouTube too and say, okay, this would be great for a live stream. And then that costs an additional however amount. So yeah, it really just depends on your packages.
Yes. There's a lot of clever stuff you can come up with.
I think something I want the listeners to hear about you guys is that, and I want you both to speak on this, and you tell me if I'm out of place by saying this. I don't think that I am, but let's see if kind of we're on the same page. You can, and I want to make sure I word this correctly, you can have a smaller-ish community on the internet, on YouTube, or a podcast, or whatever it may be, and still make a very good living because you have that small community being willing to support you. Would you agree with that? Because right now on Patreon, you guys have over 230 patrons. The smallest tier is $5 a month, so you can do the math on that, right, to see kind of where that is. And I assume there are some of them that are a part of the $10 a month, $20 or $100 a month tier, right? So with that all being the case, you can monetize a niche community on YouTube. You just got to really know how to do it. Would you agree with that?
Yes. It definitely takes time.
Yeah, and I wouldn't say we're making a very good living, but we made more money when we were doing our full-time jobs, in
I
corporate
think,
land.
well, I think we can get back to that level
Yes,
eventually.
it does, but it takes a lot of time and a lot of work. The main thing is we enjoy our day-to-day life a lot better.
It's a whole lot
doing
more
the
fun to talk
podcast.
about dinosaurs than it is to punch a clock, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would, because I know what I did for a living before I did the podcast and what I'm doing, and I can tell you right now, I'm so much happier.
Yes.
But I didn't mean to interrupt you. Continue on, because I think this is the point that I want to focus in on the most here.
Yeah, when we started, we were a little worried that there wouldn't be enough people interested in dinosaurs to create a podcast about it and, actually sustain ourselves. But what we found was partly there were already so many broad podcasts out there. Even though we started 8 years ago, even at that point, there were hundreds of thousands of podcasts, and a lot of them were just, here's the science from this week. And we didn't want to compete with every other podcast that was just talking about all the science. So we decided to get into our favorite niche, which was dinosaurs, and really just go deep. And there's enough other people out there. There are a lot of podcasts that are very, very specific, very niche, that do extremely well, like, about gardening or plants or
Farming.
yeah, it could be any specific niche, because when you're doing a podcast, the big advantage to it is literally global. Everybody in the
Yes.
world can download your podcast. So as long as there are those people somewhere in the world, they can find your show. It's not like trying to start a meetup in your local community and it's like, oh, there's only I only know 4 people that like this thing. We're not going to have a big enough group, because you are basically just combining those groups from every city everywhere.
I'd say you have to get creative, though, because just thinking of other niches, we do know of, for example, a farming podcast. But before they even launched, they were able to sell, I don't know, something like 50,000 in sponsorships, because they knew exactly who their audience was, and they knew exactly which brands to connect it to and which brands would get the most out of that.
Yeah, monetizing is definitely the easiest if you're linked to a business. So farming obviously is a business. So you can say like, okay, all these farming supply companies. Dinosaurs is a little bit trickier, we've found, because it's mostly a hobby. It's mostly entertainment,
Yes.
at least from our side of it. So it's not as easy as it could be for some niches.
As we kind of wind the interview down, I want to ask you guys if you can give the listeners some pointers or some information in regards to a Patreon or a community-funded type content where you have your community support you and pay. I have a Patreon as well, and I make a few $100s a month from it, just to be completely candid and honest. I have not honed in or focused on it as much as I definitely am going to this year, but I have seen the benefits and value in it. Have you guys found that the retention on Patreon is good? I guess that's a couple of questions there, but I'll let kind of whoever wants to take that one to go with it.
Sure. I would say yes, our retention is surprisingly good, and that has been a nice treat. Obviously, when, like right now, there's a little bit of a recession going, so some people feel the pinch, and then they're less likely to stick around, so
Right.
you get a little more turnover when economic times are not as good. But in general, yeah, the retention is quite good. It's not too expensive compared to a lot of people's other expenses. So I think having especially an option for a lower price tier, then sometimes people, if they can't afford to stay at a higher tier, they could drop to a lower tier and still support you and get most of the content.
As long as you're providing value, people are going to stick around. So for a lot of the value actually is the community itself. With us, if you join our Patreon, you can join our Discord channel. And in our Discord channel, everybody can just chat about dinosaurs all day, every day. And that is a big piece of value for a lot of people.
Yeah, and I think one piece of advice that I heard early with Patreon, which I think might be the most helpful piece of advice, is when you're making a Patreon page, you need to create content as if you already have hundreds of followers. Because if you start your Patreon page and you say, okay, give me $3 a month and I'll eventually start doing stuff if enough people are interested, nobody's ever going to join because there's nothing there for them if you're not creating stuff. So you have to bite the bullet and start making a bunch of content behind a paywall that no one is behind with 0 patrons, in the belief that eventually people will say, ooh, I want all that stuff that's behind that paywall. I'll pay to join that community. And it is it can be a little hard to motivate yourself when you're making like $3 a week or $3 a month to continue to work hard and make all this content for Patreon. But if you're going to do it, do it right. You got to actually get out there, make the content.
Well, I mean, you can create things in ways that it doesn't burn you out.
Yes. Yeah, you do want to make sustainable stuff. One of the other tips was don't make too many physical things that you need to mail to people, because that's a really quick way to burn out.
But how can you automate
downloads.
it? Right. How can you automate it? That's exactly right. That was the point that I was going to make. What I made a mistake early on was I thought that, I didn't give much value. There was not much of a value add there. Why would you do it? And I thought early on, well, this is just a way for them to support me, right? Kind of like a tip jar. But if you really want to grow a successful Patreon campaign or a community-funded type deal, you really need to, just like what you said, Garrett, you've got to have that value add, and you've got to put stuff out there that people are going to want to utilize. And so I completely agree. Guys, you have been amazing. You guys are doing wonderful. I'm so thankful that you were able to join me this week. Can you let my audience know where they can get in touch with you?
Sure. Our website is iknowdino.com, and that's got links to everything, including our YouTube channel, which is also I Know Dino. And then if you are a dinosaur fan like us, we call ourselves Dino-it-alls. Yeah, you can join our community, and that's at patreon.com/iknowdino.
We should probably spell it too, because it's IKNOWDINO.
Yep.
Good point.
Yeah, and all of that'll be in the show notes for sure.
Yeah, it's I Know Dino everywhere, or search Dinosaur Podcast.
Yep.
Well, Sabrina, Garrett, you guys are awesome. Thank you so much for joining me and sharing so much knowledge today. It's been a great knowledge-packed episode, and we'll catch you next time.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You've been listening to the YouTube Creators Podcast. We want to thank you and invite you to subscribe to the show, as well as support us on Patreon for great perks, such as having your YouTube channel featured on the show and a link on our website. Until next time, keep uploading those videos.